So our next project is going to be electric power steering in a Shoebox Ford. This is an electric power steering unit from a 2007 Saturn Vue. There are several different types of these floating around. Toyota Prius is one. There's some others. The popular unit seems to be the Saturn Vue. The Saturn one comes with the control module mounted right on it, and you get a harness here that has power in, ground, and then powered from the module to the motor, and then the car harness plugs in here, and you get signals from the ECM and some other things that tell this steering unit what to do. So when you use this in a different vehicle, obviously you don't have the ECM with all the sensors and everything. So what you need to do is you go on eBay, and there's a guy that makes this little box and a little dial controller, a little potentiometer that hooks up to this, that tricks the unit into thinking it's connected to a modern car, and also gives you the ability with the little potentiometer to dial in the amount of assist that you want. The Saturn unit comes with another piece that slides over this, and the steering wheel is attached, and what that is a collapsible steering column. So underneath here, you take those bolts out, you can see that you have, this is the input side, and what you end up with is this piece that slides in and out on that shaft, and that's how your steering column collapses in the event of a crash. So what we've done is we cut that off, so we have this spline that fits on here, which is extremely difficult to find, and that'll slide on there. So what we need to do is adapt this spline to our Shoebox Ford steering column and essentially make an adapter out of it so we can mount the stock Ford steering wheel on there. And this tube is just about the right size for the Ford steering column tube to fit inside, so we'd be able to just bolt that on there and use the column support under the dash to support the unit. On the output side, inside here you have a 16.5 millimeter by 36 spline shaft. You can buy U-joints and couplers for those, and we've taken a piece of tubing here. There's no mounting flange on this side like there is on the other side, so we've taken a piece of tubing here, welded some nuts to it, put some set screws in, put some little divots in the hub there, slip that on, tighten that on there so that that's good and solid. And then we'll adapt this side of the column to the bottom half of our Shoebox Ford steering column, and then this whole affair will be up under the dash and should give us power steering in the Shoebox Ford. We'll follow this project along. Right now we're waiting on a few more bits and pieces. The big deal here is going to be what sort of mount we make to hang this under the dash. The Shoebox has floor-mounted brake pedals, so there's really nothing up under there to hang this from. We'll have to make some sort of a bracket to hang this unit, just to take the load off it so that the column's not supporting the whole thing. And we'll figure that out as we go along. Now you may remember from a previous video the disassembly and the assembly of the Shoebox Ford steering box. We've got that steering box here, and we've pretty much rebuilt the thing, put a new sector shaft in and sector gear, new bearings, and what we needed was this worm on the shaft, because some genius cut the shaft off on this old one and ruined it. So we managed to get one of these. They're pretty hard to get with the shaft on, and what people say is that these gears can be extremely hard to get off. One routine I've seen is to take the die grinder and cut this down through here, almost all the way through. Take a chisel and split it, knock it off of there, and you can just buy the worm separately, put it on your own shaft. You have to take and heat it in the oven and then slip it on there, press it in place. But we needed the shaft anyway, so we got the whole thing. So that'll have to go in that steering box. And then at some point for this project, what we're going to have to do is cut this brand new shaft in half and put that electric power steering unit somewhere in the middle of this shaft. And we'll have to figure out once we get in the car where we're going to have to do that. We have the column that goes in, and you can see that this is approximately where the column goes through the firewall, and here's where the column hangs under the dash. So we've got plenty of room in this area to cut this tube and mount that power steering unit in the middle of this tube. And like I said, we'll have to figure that out once we get out the car, and we'll add some more video as the project goes along. Again, what we've done is taken the existing Saturn shaft and cut it off. This is the piece that was splined to slide over the input of the Saturn. It was real thin wall material. I didn't trust it, so we took a piece of round stock, bored it out to slip over that coupler, and made a more or less heavy duty coupler. Then we're going to weld this double D into that. It's got a set screw to lock it in place, and that'll go on and give us a double D input. Then what we've done is we've got a double D to a smooth. We had to take about 10 thousandths off of our shaft to fit in there. We'll weld that around there. This double D will go on there, and now we've got our steering wheel end input mounted to the input of the Saturn shaft. And this collar from the Saturn will fit over most of those couplers and cover them all up so you'll never see them. So now we just have to work on the output side. Well, we got our last piece of our puzzle shipped in. We got this coupler that's 16.5 millimeters by 3/4 smooth, and it's got a little set screw in it. There's a groove in that shaft that locks that coupler onto the spline, and we're going to have to weld this lower part of the column into that smooth, and then we'll be able to connect the steering from top to bottom. In our collar that slips over, we had to cut a slot so that we can get up inside and tighten that set screw and that jam nut, and that'll be hidden underneath the tube. You'll never see that. What we've also done with our tube here that goes on the output side of the unit with the set screws is make this bushing that reduces the size of the tube down to the Shoebox Ford size. This is just a plastic bushing. This material is called UHMW. You could use aluminum, whatever you want, hunk of wood if you want, but machined it to fit inside here and fit inside there. And also it's got a 3/4 inch hole in the center to support the shaft of the steering box and keep everything lined up. The thing is, the Ford Shoebox has 2 bearings in the box and a bushing at the top of the shaft, and that's what supports the whole shooting match. Once you cut that in half, you don't have any support in the center here. You do have the coupling, but just to be on the safe side, we bored that hole in there a little larger than 3/4 just to keep that shaft from wobbling around. This locks everything together, keeps everything on center. So when that's done, that ought to be a nice solid piece in the car. On the other end, we know that the steering wheel end of the column sticks out 1 5/8 above the tube. So when we get this final measurement here on the intake side, then we can connect our shaft and cut it to the right length. Right now it's too long, but we've got our couplers on there. That spline will slip over the input side of the steering. We've got set screws to lock everything in place. We're going to have to weld this smooth side to that smooth after we cut this column down to length. Right now obviously it's too long, but we've got to fit it up under the dash to see where all our cuts are going to be and get everything cut to length. This piece of tape on the input side is where the column support goes that bolts the column, fixes the column to the dash. So everything from here out is going to be sticking out from under the dash. And hopefully this column support will be right here and all of this will be behind the dash. We really don't know how we're going to have to cut this yet until we get it in the car. The other thing it's important to note, two things actually. When you do this, you're going to lose your column shifter, because unless you're a wizard, it's pretty much impossible to run a rod down and over and around this motor and back down the other side. Not saying it can't be done, but a little on the tricky side. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to lose your horn in the center of your steering wheel, because the horn wire runs down through the hollow shaft in the shoebox and out the bottom. And obviously with this motor assembly in the middle of the shaft, you can't run that wire down through there anymore. So you're going to have to put a horn button somewhere else, in the dash, bottom of the column, put it on the floor if you want to blow the horn with your foot. A lot of different ways to do that, but that's something that you need to consider. This modification is probably only suitable for somebody that's already modified their shoebox Ford and doesn't mind not having the column shift and not having the horn in the middle of the steering wheel.